The bus ride to Montana felt longer than Clara expected, not because of the distance, but because of the weight she carried inside her. A small suitcase rested beside her worn boots, filled with everything she owned. The rest she had left behind. A life that hadn't worked out, a place that never quite felt like home, and people who had forgotten her too easily. When the driver finally called out her stop, Clara stepped down into a wide stretch of open land. The sky seemed endless, painted in soft shades of blue and gold, and the air was cleaner than anything she'd breathed in years. In front of her, a dirt road led toward a ranch marked by a simple wooden sign, slightly tilted with age. She pulled a folded letter from her pocket and read it again, just to be sure. Housekeeping position confirmed. Lodging provided. Ask for Daniel at the ranch. Clara exhaled slowly. This was it. Her second chance. She adjusted her grip on the suitcase and began walking. The ranch came into view gradually, a modest house, with a wraparound porch, a weathered barn off to the side, and fences that looked like they'd seen better days. A few horses grazed quietly in the distance. Everything felt still, almost too still. Before she could knock, the front door creaked. Open. A tall man stepped out, his expression guarded. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and there was dust on his hands like he had been working all morning. His eyes studied her carefully, not unkind, but cautious. "Can I help you?" he asked. Clara offered a small, polite smile. "I'm Clara. I'm here about the housekeeping job." The man frowned slightly, confusion flickering across his face. "Housekeeping job?" She nodded, pulling out the letter and handing it to him. He scanned it quickly, then looked back at her, his brow furrowed deeper now. "There's been a mistake," he said plainly. "I didn't hire anyone." The words landed harder than she expected. Clara blinked, unsure how to respond. "But I received confirmation. I traveled all the way here." He handed the letter back, shaking his head. "This ranch hasn't put out any job listings." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved softly through the dry grass, carrying a silence that felt heavier by the second. Clara looked down at the letter in her hands, as if it might suddenly change. "It didn't, I understand," she said quietly, though her voice betrayed her disappointment. "I'll figure something else out." She turned slightly, glancing back at the long road she had just walked. There was nothing out there, no nearby town, no place to stay. Just miles of open land and fading daylight. The man noticed. He let out a slow breath, as if weighing something in his mind. "Wait," Clara turned back. "You said you came a long way?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I don't really have anywhere else to go right now." He looked past her for a moment, toward the empty horizon, then back again. His expression softened just slightly. "You can stay the night," he said. "There's a spare room. It's not much, but it's better than nothing." Clara hesitated. She didn't want to impose, but she also knew what the alternative looked like. "Thank you," she said gently. "I won't be any trouble." He gave a short nod and stepped aside, allowing her in. The house was simple but clean, though it carried a quiet emptiness. The furniture was worn, and there were signs of a life that had once been fuller. Pictures on the wall, a child's drawing pinned near the kitchen. As Clara stepped further inside, she noticed something else. A small figure stood at the end of the hallway. A little girl, no older than 5, watched her with wide, curious eyes. She clutched a soft, worn-out toy in her hands but didn't say a word. Clara offered a gentle smile and gave a small wave. The girl didn't wave back. She simply stared, as if trying to understand something. "Lily," the man said quietly, "go on now." The girl didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she turned and disappeared down the hallway. Clara felt a strange pull in her chest, something she couldn't quite explain. "That's my daughter," the man said, his voice softer now. "I'm Daniel," Clara nodded. "Nice to meet you." He gestured toward a small room. "You can put your things in there." "Thank you," she said again, meaning it more this time. As she set her suitcase down in the quiet room, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The walls were plain, the windows slightly open, letting in the cool evening air. This wasn't where she was supposed to be, and yet something about it didn't feel wrong. Outside, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows. Across the ranch, Clara watched the light fade, unaware that this simple mistake, this wrong address, this unexpected stop was about to change her life in ways she never could have imagined. Sometimes, the places we never planned to go are the ones we were meant to find all along. Clara woke early the next morning, long before the sun had fully risen. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The unfamiliar ceiling above her, the soft creak of wood as the house settled, and the distant sound of wind brushing across open land slowly brought her back. The ranch, the mistake. She sat up, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. The room was simple, but it had been enough warm, quiet, safe. More than she'd had in a long time. Clara stepped outside just as the first light began to stretch across the horizon. The sky was painted in pale pink and gold, and the land seemed endless in every direction. There was a peacefulness here, but also a kind of loneliness that settled deep in the chest. She noticed Daniel already at work near the barn, moving with steady purpose. He didn't seem like the kind of man who wasted time. Even from a distance, she could sense the weight he carried, not just from running the ranch, but something heavier, something unspoken. Clara hesitated, then walked toward him. "Good morning," she said softly. Daniel glanced at her, giving a brief nod. "You're up early." "I didn't want to sleep in," she replied. "Is there anything I can help with?" He paused, as if considering whether to refuse. "You don't have to do anything. You're a guest." "I know," Clara said gently, "but I'd like to help anyway." For a moment, he studied her. Then, without another word, he handed her a small bucket. "The horses need fresh water," Clara smiled faintly. "I can do that." The work was simple, but it grounded her. Carrying water, brushing dust from wooden rails, tidying small things others might overlook, it felt good to be useful. It felt even better to be somewhere that needed her, even if only for a day. When she returned to the house later that morning, she found the kitchen quiet. A few dishes sat in the sink, and the table looked like it hadn't been properly set in some time. Without thinking, Clara rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She washed the dishes, wiped down the counters, and opened the windows to let in fresh air. Then she found a few basic ingredients and began preparing a simple breakfast. Nothing fancy, just something warm. As the soft smell of cooking filled the room, Clara heard small footsteps behind her. She turned. Lily stood in the doorway again, holding her toy tightly. Her eyes were fixed on Clara, curious but cautious. "Good morning," Clara said, her voice calm and warm. "Are you hungry?" Lily didn't answer. She simply watched. Clara knelt down slightly, keeping her distance so the girl wouldn't feel overwhelmed. "I'm making breakfast. You can sit, if you'd like." After a long pause, Lily slowly walked to the table and climbed onto a chair. She didn't speak, didn't smile, but she stayed. That felt like something. A few minutes later, Daniel entered. He stopped short when he saw the kitchen. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "I wanted to," Clara replied simply. He looked at the plate she placed in front of Lily. The little girl stared at it for a moment before taking a small bite. Daniel's expression changed, just slightly. "She usually doesn't eat much in the morning," he admitted. Clara glanced at Lily, who continued eating quietly. "Maybe she just needed company," Daniel didn't respond right away. Instead, he sat down across from his daughter, watching her carefully, as if afraid the moment might disappear. The silence in the room wasn't uncomfortable, it was different now. Softer. But Clara could still feel it, the absence that lingered beneath everything. She noticed it in the way Daniel avoided certain parts of the house, in the way Lily never spoke, in the way the walls held memories that no one mentioned. Later that day, Clara found herself folding laundry in the living room. As she worked, her eyes drifted to a framed photograph on the shelf. A woman stood beside Daniel, smiling warmly. Lily, younger and brighter, sat in her arms. A family, whole. Clara picked up the photo gently, studying it. There was love there, real, deep love. The kind that leaves an echo when it's gone. She liked that picture. Clara turned to see Daniel standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, setting it back. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he interrupted, though his voice was quieter now. "That was a long time ago." Clara nodded, understanding more than he said. "She passed," he added after a moment. 2 years back." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. He gave a small shrug, as if the words didn't quite reach where they needed to. "Lily hasn't been the same since." Clara glanced down. The hallway where the little girl had disappeared earlier. "She's still there," Clara said gently. "You can see it." Daniel didn't answer, but for the first time, something in his expression shifted, not guarded, not distant. Just tired. That evening, as the sun set once again over the ranch, Clara sat quietly on the porch steps. She knew she wasn't meant to stay. By the third morning, Clara had begun to fall into a quiet rhythm at the ranch, one she hadn't expected, moving softly through the house so she wouldn't disturb anyone. The air was still cool, and the silence no longer felt as heavy as it had on her first night. Instead, it carried something gentler now. Like the beginning of change. In the kitchen, Clara prepared breakfast with the same care as the day before. Nothing complicated, just warm bread, eggs, and a bit of fruit, but she took her time with it. There was something comforting about creating small moments of normalcy in a place that had gone so long without it. As she set the table, she heard the faint sound of footsteps. Lily. The little girl appeared in the doorway, her toy tucked under one arm. She didn't hesitate as much this time. Slowly, she walked in and climbed into the same chair she had chosen yesterday. Clara smiled. "Good morning." Lily looked at her, quiet as always, but there was something different in her eyes. Less fear, more curiosity. "Would you like your hair brushed?" Clara asked gently, noticing the soft tangles from sleep. Lily didn't answer. A brush, and sitting behind the little girl. Her hands were gentle, working through each knot with patience. The moment felt strangely natural, like something she had done 100 times before. Even though she hadn't, Lily sat still, watching her reflection faintly in the window. "You have beautiful hair," Clara said softly. "It just needs a little care, that's all." She began to braid it, simple, neat, and careful not to pull. For a long moment, there was only silence. The quiet kind, not the heavy one. Then a small voice, barely above a whisper. "Mama." Clara froze. Her hand stopped mid-motion, her breath catching before she could stop it. For a second, she thought she had imagined it. But then Lily turned her head slightly, looking up at her. "Mama," she said again, a little clearer this time. The word hung in the air, fragile and powerful all at once. Clara's heart tightened. "Oh, sweetheart," she said gently, her voice barely steady. "I think you're confused." The kitchen. "Lily, He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes moved from Clara to his daughter. And then he heard it. "Mama," Lily said again. "Didn't speak." "I didn't. I heard her," Daniel interrupted, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. His eyes remained on Lily. Disbelief and something deeper flickering across his face. She hasn't. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Clara understood. Lily hadn't said that word in a long time. Maybe not since she lost her mother. Lily tugged gently on Clara's sleeve. "Mama," she repeated, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Clara knelt in front of her, her expression soft but careful. "Lily," she said kindly, "that's a very special word. Someone who loves you very much." Lily didn't argue. She simply placed her small hand into Clara's and held it. Daniel turned away slightly. The moment was too much, too sudden, too unexpected. "She used to say it every day," he said quietly. "Before." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Clara felt it again, that quiet ache in the house, the space someone had left behind. Only now, something had reached into that space, something small, but powerful. Lily didn't let go of Clara's hand during breakfast. Not once. She ate more than usual, 2 small bites at first, then more with each passing minute. Every now and then, she would glance up at Clara as if checking that she was still there. Clara stayed calm, gentle, careful not to overwhelm her. But inside, her heart was unsettled. Not in a bad way. Just changed. Later that day, Clara stepped outside to gather fresh laundry from the line. The breeze was soft, carrying the scent of open fields. She looked out across the ranch, her thoughts tangled. This wasn't her place. She wasn't supposed to be here, and yet a child had just called her Mama, like it was the most natural truth in the world. Behind her, the screen door creaked open. Daniel stepped out, his expression thoughtful. "She's been quieter than usual today," he said. Clara turned to him. "Quieter?" He nodded, not withdrawn, just calm. Daniel watched her for a moment, then looked out at the land. "That word," he said slowly, "it wasn't just a mistake." Clara didn't respond right away, because deep down, she felt the same. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. And sometimes a single word can begin to heal what silence never could. The word stayed. Clara had hoped gently, quietly, that it might fade by the next morning, that Lily would forget or replace it with something safer, something less heavy. But she didn't. "Mama." The word came again at breakfast, soft but certain, as Lily reached for Clara's hand while climbing into her chair. There was no hesitation now, no confusion in her eyes, only trust. Deep, unshaken trust. Clara felt it in her chest every time. And every time she didn't quite know what to do with it. "Lily," Clara said gently that morning, kneeling beside her again. "You can call me Clara, remember?" Lily looked. Then she gave a tiny shake of her head. "Mama," she repeated. Clara exhaled softly, glancing up at Daniel across the table. He didn't correct Lily, but he didn't encourage it either. He simply watched, quiet and thoughtful, like a man standing at the edge of something he didn't fully understand yet, but enough to be noticed. Lily started following Clara from room to room, not in a clingy way, but in a quiet, steady presence. If Clara folded laundry, Lily sat nearby with her toy. If Clara swept the floor, Lily watched with curious eyes. Sometimes she would even try to help in her own small way, and once she laughed. It was soft, brief, almost like she didn't mean to let it slip, but it was there. Clara froze when she heard it, her heart lifting in a way she couldn't explain. She looked at Lily, who quickly hid her face behind her toy, as if she wasn't used to making that sound anymore. "That was a beautiful laugh," Clara said warmly. Daniel noticed everything. He noticed the way his daughter sat closer to the table now instead of drifting away, empty, and he noticed Clara, the way she moved through the home, like she belonged there, not taking over, not forcing anything, just quietly filling the spaces that had been left behind. It unsettled him, not because it was wrong, but because it felt right, too right. The little girl carried a small clothespin in her hand, holding it carefully like it was something important. "Want to help?" Clara asked with a smile. Lily nodded. Lily tried, her tiny fingers fumbling at first, but Clara guided her gently. "There you go," Clara said softly. "Doing it." Lily looked up at her, pride flickering across her face. "Mama," she said again, this time with the faintest hint of a smile. Clara felt her chest tighten. She didn't correct her this time. She couldn't. Instead, she brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face and returned the smile, small but real. From the porch, Daniel watched them. He leaned against the wooden railing, arms crossed, his gaze steady but conflicted. This wasn't part of any plan. Clara wasn't supposed to be there. She had arrived by mistake, nothing more than a mix-up in paperwork. And yet, in just a few days, she had done something he hadn't been able to do in 2 years. She had reached Lily, not with force, not with pressure, but with patience. Genuine. Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He should tell Clara to move on, to find the right ranch, the right job, the right place she was meant to be. That would be the sensible thing to do, the safe thing. But when he looked at Lily, really looked at her, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Light, and the thought of taking that away didn't sit right with him. That evening, the three of them sat together on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky burned in shades of orange and gold, casting a warm glow over the land. Lily sat between them, her small hands resting comfortably, one in Clara's, one near her father's. She didn't speak much, but she didn't need to. Her presence said enough. This wasn't her home. And yet, sitting there in that moment, it felt dangerously close to both. Daniel glanced at her as if sensing the same thing. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly. Clara nodded. "I know." A pause. Then he added, "But Lily, she hasn't been like this in a long time." Clara looked down at the little girl who leaned gently against her side. "She just needed someone to meet her where she was," Clara said softly. By the end of the week, the ranch no longer felt like a place Clara had simply passed through. It felt lived in again. The floors stayed clean, the windows open, and the quiet, once heavy and still, had softened into something almost peaceful. Small changes, barely noticeable to an outsider, meant everything inside those walls. And at the center of it all was Lily. She no longer lingered in doorways or watched from a distance. Now she followed Clara openly, her tiny footsteps padding across wooden floors like a steady rhythm. She smiled more, ate more, and sometimes when she thought no one noticed, she even hummed softly to herself. And always, without hesitation, but because she could no longer bear to take that comfort away. That morning began like the others, quiet, gentle, familiar. Clara was in the kitchen, kneading dough for fresh bread. While Lily sat at the table drawing with a small set of colored pencils Clara had found tucked away in a drawer. Every so often, Lily would glance up, just to make sure Clara was still there. She always was. A soft knock at the front door broke the calm. Clara wiped her hands and went to answer it. A delivery man stood on the porch, holding a small bundle of letters. "Mail," he said, handing them over with a polite nod. "Thank you," Clara replied. She closed the door and glanced down at the stack, flipping through them absent-mindedly until one envelope caught her eye. Her name, Clara's. Heart skipped. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She opened it slowly, and as her eyes moved across the page, everything inside her stilled. It was official. The mistake had been confirmed. The housekeeping job she had applied for, her real position, was waiting for her at another ranch miles away. They had been expecting her days ago. The letter. No confusion, no delay. No more excuses. Clara lowered the letter, her fingers tightening slightly around the edges. For a moment, the sounds of the house faded, the soft scratch of Lily's pencils, the wind outside, even her own breathing. This was what she had come for. A job. Place to stay. A chance to start over. And now it was right in front of her. So why did it feel like something was slipping away? Mama? Clara looked up. Lily was standing beside her now, small hand reaching for hers. Clara quickly folded the letter, forcing a gentle smile. Yes, sweetheart? Lily held up her, drawing a simple picture, uneven but full of color. 3 figures stood under a bright sun, a tall man, a small child, and a woman between them, all holding hands. It's beautiful, she said softly. Lily beamed just a little. Then, without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around Clara's waist. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, resting her hand lightly on the child's back. This wasn't supposed to be hers. None of it was. That afternoon, Clara kept herself busy. Too busy. She cleaned what didn't need cleaning, organized what was already in place, and avoided looking at the folded letter resting quietly in her pocket. But no matter what she did, a decision waiting to be made. Daniel noticed the change. It was subtle at first, the way Clara moved a little faster, spoke a little less, and seemed distant. By evening, it was impossible to ignore. You all right? He asked, leaning against the kitchen doorway as she washed dishes that were already clean. Clara didn't turn. I'm fine. Daniel didn't move. You don't look. Fine. She paused, her hands still in the water. For a second, she considered telling him the truth, the letter, everything. But then she thought of Lily, the way she laughed now. Clara swallowed softly. Just tired, I guess. Daniel watched her for a long moment, knowing there was more but not pushing. Get some rest, he said quietly. Clara nodded, but rest didn't come that night. Later, as the house fell into silence, Clara sat on the edge of her bed, the letter finally open in her hands again. The words hadn't changed. The choice hadn't either. Stay where she didn't. Belong or leave, and lose something she hadn't even realized she'd found. A soft creak at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Lily stood there, clutching her toy, her eyes heavy with sleep. Mama, she whispered. Clara's heart ached. She set the letter aside and opened her arms. Lily walked to her without hesitation, climbing gently into her lap. Clara held her close, resting her cheek lightly against the child's hair. I'm right here, she murmured. Lily sighed softly, settling against her. Safe, trusting, unaware, Clara looked past her toward the folded letter on the bed. Tomorrow, everything would have to be faced. The truth wouldn't stay hidden forever, but tonight she let herself stay. Because sometimes the hardest decisions aren't about where you're meant to go. They're about what you're willing to leave behind. Clara barely slept. The letter stayed where she had left it, folded neatly on the small wooden table beside her bed, but it felt louder than anything in the room. Position waiting by morning, the weight of it had settled deep. In her chest, she moved through the house quietly, as she always did, but something had shifted. The ease she had found over the past few days was gone. Replaced by a quiet tension she couldn't shake. In the kitchen, she prepared breakfast out. Of habit-measured movements, steady hands, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She didn't hear Daniel come in. What is it? His voice cut gently through the silence. Clara startled slightly, turning toward him. I didn't hear you. I noticed, he said, studying her face. You've been somewhere else since yesterday. Clara forced a small smile. Just tired. Daniel didn't return the smile. He stepped further into the room, his gaze steady now, more certain. That's not it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without a word, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the table between them. The letter. Clara's breath caught. I found it, he said quietly. There was no anger in his voice. That almost made it worse. Clara looked down at the paper, then back at him. I was going to tell you, she said softly. When? Daniel asked, not sharply, but directly. After you left? The question lingered in the air. Clara didn't answer right away. I didn't know how, she admitted finally. Every time I tried, I looked at Lily and You decided for us, Daniel finished. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it now. Not anger. Not exactly. Hurt. Clara shook her head quickly. No, that's not what I was trying to do. Then what were you doing? He asked. She hesitated, searching for the right words, but there weren't any simple ones. I stayed because she needed me, Clara said quietly, and maybe because I needed this too. Daniel let out a slow breath, turning away slightly as if trying to gather his thoughts. She's calling you, Mama, he said, almost to himself. Clara closed her eyes briefly. I know. You should have stopped it. The words landed heavier this time. Clara looked up. I tried. Not hard enough. That stung. She hasn't spoken like this in 2 years, Clara said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She laughs now. She eats. She feels safe again. How was I supposed to take that away from her? Daniel turned back to her, his expression conflicted. And what happens when you leave? He asked. Clara didn't have an answer for that. Because she had been asking herself the same question. At that moment, soft footsteps echoed from the hallway. Both of them fell silent. Lily stood there, looking between them, her small hands clutching her toy a little tighter than usual. She could feel it. The tension. The change, Mama? She said softly, walking toward Clara. The word hit harder this time. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Clara knelt down, her expression immediately softening. Hey, sweetheart, she said gently, opening her arms. Lily stepped into them without hesitation. Clara held her close, her hand resting protectively against her back. Daniel watched the moment unfold, something shifting behind his eyes. This wasn't pretend. It wasn't forced. It was real to Lily. At least. And that made everything more complicated. The rest of the day passed in a quiet strain. Clara kept her distance more than usual, not out of choice, but because she didn't know where she stood anymore. Daniel worked outside longer than he needed to, his movements sharper, more restless, and Lily stayed close to Clara, as if sensing something she couldn't understand. By late afternoon, the sky had begun to change. Clouds rolled in slowly, dimming the sunlight, casting the ranch in softer shades of gray. The wind picked up just enough to carry a chill. Clara stood on the porch, arms wrapped lightly around herself, watching the horizon. She heard footsteps behind her. Daniel. He stopped beside her. Not too close, not too far. For a while, neither of them spoke. I wasn't angry about the letter, he said finally. Clara glanced at him. Then what was it? He took a moment before answering. I was angry because it mattered, he admitted. Clara's expression softened slightly. I had things under control before you came, he continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. It wasn't easy, but it was stable. Clara said nothing. And now, he added, looking out at the land, everything's different. There was no accusation in his voice this time, just truth. Clara swallowed gently. Different isn't always bad. Daniel let out a quiet breath. No, he said, but it's harder to walk away from. The words lingered between them because they both knew what he meant. Inside the house, Lily stood near the window, watching them. The storm never fully came. The clouds had gathered the night before, heavy and uncertain, but by morning they drifted apart again, leaving behind a sky that felt strangely quiet, like the world was holding its breath inside the ranch house. That same quiet lingered, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting. Clara stood in her room, her small suitcase open on the bed. For the first time since arriving, she was packing. Each folded piece of clothing felt heavier than it should have. Not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if taking her time could somehow delay what came next. On the table beside her, the letter lay open. No more hiding. No more waiting. Today, she would leave. A soft knock came at the door. Clara paused. Come in. The door creaked open just enough for Lily to peek through. Her small face looked uncertain. Mama? The word barely made it out this time. Clara's chest tightened instantly. Hey, sweetheart, she said gently, kneeling down. Come here. Lily stepped inside, her eyes drifting toward the suitcase. She didn't need an explanation. Children often understand more than they're told. You going? Lily asked quietly. Clara swallowed. She hadn't expected Lily to speak that clearly. Not like this. Clara reached for her, resting her hands gently on the little girl's shoulders. I have to go for a while. For work? Lily asked. Clara nodded slowly. Yes. Lily's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Clara's neck. Clara closed her eyes, holding her just as tightly. I'm right here, she whispered. Though she knew it wouldn't be true for long, from the hallway, Daniel stood still. He hadn't meant to listen, but once he heard Lily's voice, clear, steady, full, he couldn't walk away. He watched the two of them through the half-open door, and something inside him shifted. Not suddenly, but deeply. Later that morning, Clara finished packing. The house felt different again, like something fragile had been disturbed. Lily stayed close, quieter than she had been in days. She didn't laugh, didn't play. She just watched every movement, every step. As if trying to understand how something so warm could leave. Clara carried her suitcase to the front door. Daniel was already there. He had said very little since the night before, and now, standing across from him, Clara felt the weight of everything unsaid. I'll head out before noon, she said softly. The other ranch is a few hours away. Daniel nodded once. That's probably best. The words sounded practical, but they didn't feel right. Lily stood behind Clara, her small fingers gripping the edge of her dress. Mama, don't go. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it broke something in the room. Clara froze. Slowly, she turned and knelt down again. Oh, sweetheart. Lily shook her head, tears filling her eyes now. Stay here, she whispered, with me. Clara felt her own eyes sting. I wish I could, she said softly. But you can, Lily insisted, her voice trembling now. This is your home. The words hung in the air. Simple, honest, powerful. Daniel looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening. He had been holding on to something: logic, routine, control. But watching his daughter now, hearing her, he couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just about a job or a mistake. This was about what had come back into their lives. Lily held on to Clara tighter, burying her face into her shoulder. Please, she whispered. Clara closed her eyes, her arms wrapped protectively around the little girl. Every part of her wanted to stay, but wanting something didn't make it hers to take. Clara. Daniel's voice cut through softly. She looked up. He stepped forward, his expression no longer guarded, just honest. You said you stayed because she needed you, he began. Clara nodded faintly. And maybe because you needed us too. Her breath caught slightly. Yes. Daniel exhaled slowly, glancing down at Lily, then back at Clara. She wasn't the only one who changed, he said quietly. Clara didn't speak. She didn't need to. Daniel took another step closer. Kept telling myself this was temporary, he continued. That you'd leave and things would go back to how they were. He paused. But the truth is, he looked around the house, the cleaner space, the warmth, the life that had returned. Don't think we can go back to that. Clara's heart pounded quietly in her chest. Daniel. She started, unsure where he was going. He shook his head slightly. I don't know what this is supposed to be, he admitted, and I don't have all the answers. Then his gaze softened. But I do know this. He looked at Lily, still holding on to Clara. She chose you. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't empty. Clara felt something shift inside. Her not uncertainty, not fear. Something steadier, something real. Daniel met her eyes again. You don't have to leave, he said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried everything. Clara looked down at Lily, then back at the open door. Then finally back at Daniel. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't what she came for. But sometimes the right path isn't the one we plan. It's the one we feel. Clara slowly set her suitcase down. And in that moment, she made her choice. Not out of need, not out of fear, but out of something stronger. Because sometimes family isn't something you find. It's something that finds you and asks you to stay. The suitcase stayed by the door, unopened, unmoved. And somehow everything felt different because of it. The house was quiet that afternoon, but not the kind of silence that once filled it. This quiet carried something softer now, something settled. Like the walls themselves had been waiting for this moment. Clara stood near the window, her hands resting lightly on the frame as she looked out across the open land. The field stretched endlessly, touched by golden sunlight, calm and steady. Just days ago, this place had been nothing more than a mistake. Now, it felt like a beginning. Behind her, she heard the gentle sound of footsteps. Lily. Clara turned just in time to see the little girl run toward her, a bright, unguarded smile lighting up her face, something that had once seemed so rare. You stayed, Lily said, her voice filled with relief. Clara knelt down, opening her arms. I stayed, she confirmed softly. Lily wrapped herself around her again, this time not out of fear, but joy. Clara held her close, closing her eyes for a brief moment as that feeling settled deep inside her chest. Not uncertainty, not hesitation, just peace. Across the room, Daniel watched them. He hadn't expected things to feel this clear. For so long, his life had been about holding things together, managing the ranch, taking care of Lily, keeping everything from falling apart. It had become routine, necessary, safe. But somewhere along the way, it had also become empty. And now, that emptiness was gone. Not completely, but enough to matter. He stepped forward slowly. You're sure? He asked, his voice steady, but quieter than usual. Clara looked up at him, Lily still holding on to her. I am, she said. There was no doubt in her eyes. Daniel nodded once, as if accepting something he had already begun to understand. Then we'll figure it out, he replied. Simple words. But they carried something more this time. Partnership. The days that followed didn't rush forward. They unfolded gently, naturally, like something that had always been meant to happen. Clara found her place at the ranch, not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as someone who belonged. She helped where she could, learned what she didn't know, and brought a quiet warmth into everything she touched. The house stayed alive with small, meaningful routines, shared meals, open windows, soft laughter. And Lily changed the most. She spoke more now, not just single words, but full thoughts, small stories, little questions about everything around her. Her laughter came easier, brighter, like it had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. And yes, she still said it, Mama. Only now Clara didn't hesitate when she heard it. She didn't correct it. She didn't question it, because somewhere along the way, it had stopped feeling misplaced. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields, the three of them stood together near the fence line. The horses grazed quietly nearby, and the breeze carried that. Same soft calm Clara had noticed on her first day. Only now, it felt different. Daniel rested his arms on the wooden rail, glancing over at Clara. Strange, isn't it? He said. Clara looked at him. What is? He nodded toward the land. All of this. I spent so long trying to keep it going, but it never felt whole. Clara followed his gaze. And now? She asked. Daniel looked at Lily, who was chasing after a butterfly, her laughter echoing across the field. Now it does, he said quietly. Clara smiled faintly. She understood that feeling. More than she expected to. For a long time she had been searching for something, stability, belonging, a place where she didn't feel like she had to keep moving on. She thought it would come from a job, a plan, a carefully chosen path. But instead, it came from a mistake, a wrong address, a door she wasn't supposed to knock on. Lily ran back toward them, breathless and smiling, slipping her small hand into Clara's without hesitation. Come see, she said excitedly. Clara laughed softly. All right, lead the way. As they walked together, Daniel followed just behind them, his steps slower, his expression thoughtful but lighter than it had been in years. The ranch wasn't perfect. There was still work to do, still things to fix, still days that would be long and uncertain. But it was no longer empty. It was no longer just a place to survive. It had become something more. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, casting the land in warm shades of gold and amber, Clara paused for a moment.